Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Aspire, the podcast channel of the Ivy Dream. Today, we are very happy to be joined by Andrew Steen, a, a candidate for both an JD and an MBA from Harvard. We will go through Andrew's thinking process, his application process, and most importantly, what he's doing now and what he has planned going forward. Andrew, we'd like to welcome you very much.
Thanks so much, Michael. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to chat more.
Wonderful. Andrew, you have a truly a unique background to the audience. First of all, Andrew has his undergraduate degree from Vanderbilt, but he subsequently had a very stellar career in the military before applying to Harvard. Andrew, would you please walk us through that?
Yeah, of course. So originally I'm from Chicago, like one of the suburbs of Chicago, and then went to Vanderbilt for my undergrad. And while I was there, I honestly didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Like I didn't even have a major decided. I ultimately chose math for a couple of reasons. One of which was that it was a pretty broad major, and because I still didn't know what I wanted to do, so it left a lot of doors open. And then one day on campus, I saw these guys walking around in Army uniforms and didn't really know what was going on. I think I ended up talking to one of them, and they explained that they were part of the ROTC program, which is basically a way to like conditionally join the Army but still be in school. There are all these other benefits and experiences. And then once you graduated, you would join the Army. And I didn't really think much about it. I was like, oh, that seems cool. And really subsequently joined and kind of never looked back. Like it was certainly not a decision that I thought super long and deep. I mean, I thought long about it, but it wasn't as much of a creating the pros and cons list as people might think. It was kind of just like, oh, that seems exciting. It seems like maybe it plays to my strengths a little bit, and it seems really impactful. And so I showed up to ROTC a couple weeks later, and like I said, I never looked back. And so what that meant was after I graduated college, I owed some time to the Army as an officer. And what I chose to do within the Army was first become an infantry officer, which for those who aren't familiar is honestly probably the like stereotypical picture of what people have in mind of the Army. You know, it's kind of like walking around in the woods, doing kind of ground operations on, walking around with heavy packs. It was something I chose, I think, because it seemed to be like of the jobs available to graduating officers, the one that was, more, let's just say it was more in the blender than others. And I felt like if I was joining the Army, I wanted to be kind of at the apex of what was available. And that was really a theme that I think, underlied my entire Army career. So I became an infantry officer. I did a bunch of, when you first join, you do a bunch of training. And then I was in Washington for a bit, and then I joined the Ranger Regiment after a couple years in the Army. And the logic behind joining the Ranger Regiment was honestly about the same as it was for me picking infantry, right? It was like, okay, you're in the Army, there's all these kind of avenues you can go, and then there's one that is probably more challenging than the rest. It has, higher highs and lower lows than the rest. And it is kind of at the edge, so to speak, of what's going on. And by the edge, I mean like the front. And so that excited me. I joined the Ranger Regiment and grew immensely as a person because I was around so many just unbelievable people. Like the people that I was around are probably the most stellar group of people I'll ever be around in my life. And it's a group of people that I think about all the time and learn so much from, and certainly wouldn't be the same without. So,
Andrew, that was fascinating. How were there specific skills that you were seeking when you accepted your commission?
Yeah. I don't, I guess like broadly, like leadership, I understood that there was this nebulous concept of, oh, the military will teach you leadership skills. I honestly had no idea what that meant. That was something I was definitely seeking. Um, I don't think that was like a major. I honestly don't remember. I don't think that was definitely not the reason I joined. I mean, was it among the major reasons potentially? I honestly joined more out of the impact and excitement. But yes, I would say like definitely there was that nebulous kind of, oh, you'll learn leadership skills as an Army officer, which I had heard, and I probably didn't know exactly what it meant at the time.
Andrew, was your undergraduate education very useful in your Army career?
It's a good question. I think in subtle or indirect ways it was. I think, and I'll break this up into two parts. I think I'll say my undergraduate studies and in one part, and then the second part, the other things I did on campus as an undergrad. So I think the studies in mathematics, I definitely think it was helpful in indirect ways. I think, I mean, I was just like I wasn't applied math. I wasn't statistics. I was just like mathematics, bachelor's of arts, which is very, it's broad, it's theoretical. And so I do think it helped train me to think in a more rigorous way than I was thinking before. I would say actually the same thing about law school too. And so I think that helps in indirect ways. Like I think you just become a little bit better of a thinker. You kind of break problems down better than you did before. You think in more, in logic that's more disciplined and things of that nature. Which yes, I do think so. I also think like honestly, as a separate note, like the math, some of my classes were really, really difficult and there weren't, safety nets grading wise on them. And so there were definitely times, a lot of times I was like, oh, wow, I really think I might fail this class, like legitimately. And so, and there would be classes where I would be halfway through the semester, but I couldn't tell you a single thing we've learned. Like it was all just so over my head. And so that also, I think, really indirectly helped me because it taught me that it just taught me to stay calm in those circumstances, right? Like, oh, it's pretty normal to like, not normal, but I kind of got used to being in this situation where I was like, okay, I am halfway through the semester. I have no clue what I've learned. I have a big test coming up and I'm going to have to like figure this out before the test. And that is very, especially as like a undergrad student, like that's not a comfortable feeling at first. And I think being in that situation over and over again taught me like, okay, you can just like in retrospect, something that you're able to complete. There are times along that journey where you might say, there's no way you can't think of how you're going to get through the journey, but then you end up doing it. You kind of break it down into small pieces. You stay calm, you stay confident, things like that. And honestly, like this may sound weird, but like the math major was a way that I got experience with that. And obviously you get experience with that almost every day in the Army. And so that was kind of another, I mean, I wouldn't advertise that as like a reason for picking a major, but that was there. And then the second bucket, and the last thing I'll say about Vanderbilt was kind of the extracurricular stuff. Like I think something that was so great about Vanderbilt, I love that school. And one of the things that was so great about it was that there were so many opportunities to really challenge yourself and grow as a person outside of the classroom. And so whether it was through, community service organizations or sports or Greek life or the ROTC program, I was engaged in a lot of different communities with people from really different backgrounds. And it allowed me to really, like, on the one hand, just learn, outside of the classroom what the world is like because you're with people from so many different backgrounds. And then two, to take meaningful roles in these organizations and really challenge yourself and learn about like how you lead people. Again, it doesn't compare to the gravity of military leadership, but as far as like what you can get as a 19-year-old in college, I think it was at least a good signal at first to be like, okay, these are the types of styles that I tend to use. These are how people respond. XYZ. So yeah.
That is fascinating. That is truly fascinating. So, Andrew, now you're in the Army. I assume you have a 5-year ROTC commitment. When did you start thinking about continuing your education?
Yeah, I went back and forth on decision for a long, long time. And eventually I decided it was best for me to not continue in the military and go challenge myself in other ways. And then once I made that decision, I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do? And I have this goal in mind of having, a profound social impact on the on our country and maybe more broadly. And I want to do that through entrepreneurship because I think that plays to my strengths and my interests. And so that was like something I was okay. I'm leaving the Army. I want to do this social impact entrepreneurship, let's just call it. And how do I get there? And so I was like, I think I should go get a JD MBA, which is a little bit of an unconventional joint degree, I guess, depending on where you go. And the reason I did that was there were a couple of reasons. One, I think the MBA part seems probably pretty straightforward to people. Like, you want to be an entrepreneur, go get an MBA. That made a lot of sense to me. I think, especially coming from the military, I think there's a lot. I actually learned, like, some people talk about business school in different ways and how much they learn academically. I learned a good deal. I have a year left. I still am learning a good deal academically because it was even just like the language of business was very foreign to me. And so, of course, it's stuff you can read on, you can buy a book and read it all. But I do think there was a higher academic return for someone coming from the military than for someone coming from like a more traditional like banking or consulting path. So I would just throw that out there. For the JD, I think like a couple of reasons drove me to the JD. One, I was actually like, should I go into the legal field? I've since moved off that decision and decided not to. But I think the JD is a really helpful experience in so many other ways. For one, like for me, I am interested in returning to the public sector at one point in my life. And I really do think like when we think about policies, a lot of policies are laws. I mean, of course, there are other such budgetary levers that officials can pull, but a huge lever that underlies policy is just creating statutes or regulations, and those are just laws. And so I think like for me, it was like, okay, if I want to be back in the public sector, I think I do need to understand how people interpret laws, how people think about laws. What are the certain trade-offs that people make when they're writing laws? And what are the positives and negatives of a common law system that we have, and how much discretion should be given to judges? How much should we lean on Congress? How much does a political gridlock actually make a difference? And all these questions, I think, are, in my opinion, best answered through law school. And I think for those who want to have a career in Washington, it's very helpful to understand these things, because a very well-intended law can just be ineffective if it isn't rigorous from a legal perspective. And so that was a big reason for me. And then I also think in the shorter term, there's a huge benefit to getting the JD is in the way it makes you think. And I alluded to this earlier with math. Fundamentally, what you do in law school, or I mean, I guess I can only speak to Harvard, but fundamentally what you're doing is you are reading a case every day, which is a compilation of just complicated things, right? Like real life happens. Somebody, sells their business to somebody else, but then going around in the background where that person had these other relationships and was doing these other things. And then the person that bought it was also doing these things that maybe they shouldn't have been doing. And it's basically, you get a situation that's really complicated and it's convoluted, a set of facts without always a direction. And your job is to read through the situation and then read through the body of cases that resemble it in some way, and then come up with a way to parse through the complexity. And so what you're doing is you're getting a bunch of complicated things and you're having to simplify them in a rigorous way. and you're having to kind of boil down, like, what are the actual things you need to know in order to solve this? And it does give you a way of thinking about complexity and uncertainty and risk and decision making that I think is actually a fundamentally better way of thinking than what I think business school does. I think like the JD and lawyers are trained to think at a higher order because they have to. And that's really the way that common law works. And so I think that's a skill that's generalizable outside the law and really into any field, which is in business. Like every day you're confronted with complexity, you're confronted with risk, you're confronted with uncertainty, and you have to make a decision. Like, how are we actually going to decide to move forward given the uncertain environment, and coming up with rigorous ways and ways that are robust to changes in the environment of how to think about trade-offs, I think is really, really beneficial and something that law school trains you really well on. And that's not to say non-lawyers are bad at this. Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that one of the ways in which to build that skill is law school. And I think it does a really, really good job in doing that.
Oh, that is something we've never heard before. I'd like to come back to that general topic in a little bit. First, let's talk about the application process, Andrew.
Yeah.
Andrew, how on earth did you manage to prepare for GREs while in the Army?
I took a practice test GMAT and GRE before I even started studying. I'm a math guy. And so I actually think I would have done better on the GMAT. I think the GMAT just played to my strengths better. But like the fact that the GRE was accepted at both schools, was great. And so that was overwhelmingly persuasive for me. And so I studied a lot for the GRE. The GRE is just like a different test, right? Like, so it is more general, right? Like the GMAT is just for business school. The LSAT is just for law school. The GRE is for like all grad schools. And so it's kind of other than the writing, it has like math, which is much more, it's less complicated math than the GMAT. The reading comprehension I found was a little bit tougher than the GMAT. And then what really I think differentiates the GRE is there's like a lot of vocabulary on it, and vocab is really hard to study for. And so I honestly don't have that great of a vocab, especially when you compare me to law students who basically speak in Latin sometimes. I had to actually spend a lot of time studying flashcard, like GRE flashcards. Like I actually think probably about half of my studying was that. And I know some people that have crushed the GRE that didn't study vocab at all because they just have a better vocab. And so I actually think like when people are deciding on which test to take, I think the GRE does have this reputation of being an easier test. That might be true. I honestly don't know. And I don't know how you could really measure that. I just think it's like, what are your strengths? If you're someone that reads a lot and has a great vocab, then the GRE, you're just like, you're going to be in a great starting position. If you're someone that doesn't have a great vocab, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult. And it is, vocab is like a lot harder to study for, right? Because it's not like there's a word bank that they give you. It's like, there's just like people, I don't know, these testing companies have figured out these are like the common words, but you're for sure going to encounter words you've never seen before. And yes, there are tools to reason, to inference, like, okay, it might be A or it might be B, but at the end of the day, either you know it or you don't. Whereas things like math and reading comprehension, I do think those skills are much more tractable. And so that's how I would think about it. But yeah, I took the GRE, luckily, which was a 2 birds, 1 stone thing. And then and then right after that, I started working on my applications.
So Andrew, at Harvard, both business school and law school, the essays are very, very general, more general than any other school. How did you approach it? You surely have so much that you could comment on.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say like the first thing I did was try to talk to a lot of people. I think admission stuff is obviously it's a bit of a black box. Like no one really knows. And that's how it's designed, right? Like if there was like a transparent rubric, then people could easily game the system. And so I think it's helpful for people to talk to a lot of people and just try to pattern recognize and then make your own judgment call on like how it's best to approach it. The way I thought about it was, and this is more for business school, but your application basically I was like, okay, what are like the 2 sentences I want these people, the admissions committee, to think about me when they're done reading my full application? Like, what do I want them to think about me? And then I was like, okay, I wanted them to think it was like something about being a leader that is like willing to grow in a lot of ways. Like, so I think that was based. I don't know. I came up with it. I don't think I don't remember if I totally wrote it down or whatever, but I was like, this is kind of my elevator pitch. I wanted them to think about me. And then I looked at the main tools of the application and said, okay, which tool is best to convey which kind of part of that message? And so you have like your resume, right? Which I think your resume is where you're communicating how you are, like your achievements, your aptitude, your success, your professional success. And there's just something about a resume which like more socially acceptable to, not brag, but kind of just be like, here are my achievements. Whereas on an essay, I personally don't think that's the right way to go. So you have your resume, which talks about your professional success. You have your test scores and GPA, which talks about your academic aptitude. And then you have your letters of recommendation and your essay. And so I thought the resume and the test stuff was pretty clear what you should communicate there. The letters of recommendation, I tried to talk to my recommenders and just give them a good idea of what else I was doing. I would say, hey, here's my application. And then and then I gave them like a couple bullet points of like, here are the ways in which like you and I have worked together. And if you're comfortable writing about this experience, I think that would be great. And so I think the recommendations are great places to convey. And of course you can't like write them yourself. So you're going to have to, I think you can like guide them in a way to just say like, hey, I would love if you can talk about my ability to work with others or something like that. Like to me, that comes across better in a letter of recommendation than in your own essay, because anyone could just say, yeah, people love me, but it's different when it comes from somebody else. And so then I think it came to the last piece, which is the essay. And it's like, what do I want to communicate on the essay, or what was like left to communicate, right? I think if you're talking about like a leader who's, had a reasonable amount of things break his way in his military career, I think those things are communicated already through the resume and through the recommendation. And what I wanted to communicate in my essay was like, okay, the fact that I'm like willing to like grow, and I don't like want to just sit in my own echo chamber my whole life and just like think that what I know is the best way to think about things and be done. And so I wrote about an experience where I had with someone I was really close with. We basically had like it was kind of like a disagreement, and it was like, how did we resolve this disagreement? And it was kind of under a lot of pressure for both of us. And I thought that story was like conveyed to me like, oh, like, I think it conveyed 2 things. One, at a surface level, is like, I'm capable of, having a disagreement with someone and still working with them and then coming to a compromise, which I hate to say is like a skill that seems like something that should be called out now. And then 2, I think it showed like I was willing to reflect on what the lesson was. And my biggest lesson, like in cases where it's like a high pressure, high stress situation where you don't see eye to eye, I was always, my default, throughout most of my life was always to just like talk and really try to make my case. But in this one scenario, I just didn't really do that much talking. And the fact that he was able to really voice his opinion and I honestly listened to it, like that was our relationship, was I listened to him and gave him a lot of weight. That was really important to him. And then that was kind of a base pad off of which we could come to a compromise. And so that was like the main message of my essay. And I really do think that was something that could only be communicated through an essay, right? I don't know if that, I think like my takeaway, so I wouldn't have wanted a recommender to say it. And I wouldn't have wanted, to just put that in like one of those 3-sentence answers throughout the application. I thought that was important enough to call out in an essay. So I guess in sum, I think the first step before diving into the essay is to actually look at the whole application and say, what do I want to convey? And then you look at all the pieces of it and say, which part of that elevator pitch am I communicating where? Because you don't really want to be that redundant. It's a waste of opportunity because you only get finite opportunity. So you want to make sure everything's complementary. And I think the best use of an essay is something personal. I definitely don't think people should brag and talk about how good they are. I definitely don't think people should say things that are just like surface level takeaways. I think it should be something really personal to you and really profound, and something that is relevant, is truthful, and is relevant to your experience at business school. And so that's kind of how I thought about it. Obviously, everyone's will be different, but yeah.
That was a great strategy. It clearly paid off. That was wonderful to hear, Andrew. If we may step forward now, you're coming to the end of your career in the Army, preparing to move off to Harvard. Were you intimidated by the famed case study method at both Harvard Business School and Harvard Law School?
No, I actually love it. I thought I would love it, and I do love it. And I think the Harvard Law, actually the case method started at Harvard Law School. I think it is much more common across law schools now. And I don't think it's as common across business schools, especially not to the extent that it's used at HBS, which is every single class. I am a big proponent of it. I would say this, like, certainly there are people that I think generally people love it at HBS. I definitely think there are people that have qualms about it, which is totally fair. Any kind of method that you teach a class is going to have a trade-off, right? There's no perfect method. And so I think it's uncontroversial to say that like a case method shines in surrounding a topic that is much more art than science, like leadership or like nuanced, difficult decisions to make in the workplace. Like when you're talking about that, it is helpful to hear from of wide variety and a wide diversity of people, because there isn't an answer that is like, at least in many cases, scientifically provable. At least I think. So I think most people would say yes, case method there. Where people kind of have a little bit of a want for more with the case method is things like finance classes, where there isn't always a right answer, but there is more or less like a band of correct answers and then a band of incorrect answers. And I think it's fair enough to say, yeah, we'd rather be lectured because we just want to know how to do this and what the answer is. And like I said, there is a trade-off. For me, the positives of the case method that outweigh lecture is, one, it's just student engagement. I would say, like, at least for me, I'm just going to be honest about myself. I would assume this is true of a lot of people. If you're just getting lectured at about a topic that may appear to be a little bit dull for 80 minutes, like, I'm not going to pay attention that much. I'll have to force myself, but then I'll certainly ebb in and out. And then it's like, okay, what am I actually even getting out of this? The case method, you're locked in the whole time because, one, you have to participate. And so the fact that you are like, I have to participate, forces you to really think about what they're saying and not just be like, oh yeah, of course. And so that to me is really, really helpful. And I think the positive of the case method is the student engagement. And I just think it's like, what are you going to school for? Like, in my opinion, like, if you're going to school to be like the next Warren Buffett, then I'm not sure if you like an MBA makes the most sense for you. But I think if you're going to school to be a general manager, or in my opinion, what a lot of people should go to school for is to start companies, then it teaches you to just like think more broadly, think more strategically, and just understand different points of view. And the fact that so many people are talking in class, it makes it inevitable that different points of view are going to surface. And you being able to hear those and form an opinion on those is, in my opinion, I'm a huge fan because of the engagement and the fact that you're hearing a lot of different perspectives.
Oh, yes, indeed. You surely would. Andrew, what have been your favorite courses thus far at either school?
Favorite courses. Yeah. I would say at the business school, my favorite course was probably you take a course on like entrepreneurial management in your first year. And to me, I really like that course because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and it was great to learn about those things. And two, I think the professor of that course was someone that was very willing to kind of push students to think beyond their preconceptions that they arrived with. I think he understood that and understood that his job was to make people think differently and become, and because that's how you become better leaders. And I kind of see things that way as well. In law school, your first year in law school is a lot of kind of, standard ones that are useful. They're important. You have to take, but wouldn't say the most interesting. I think law school just comes down to way more. It comes down to the professor actually more than the class. And so, honestly, teach me. If the topic of the law could be the most boring topic of all time, but with a good professor, I think it makes a world of a difference. And so, and over time, I think it forces people to, one, just think more rigorously as they form their opinions. And then two, be comfortable either abandoning or modifying, or sometimes doubling down on an opinion. And to me, that's what school's all about. And I think it should be happening more. And I give those professors a lot of credit that do a great job of that. And there certainly are plenty of those professors out there.
That was fascinating, Andrew. Andrew, you have a goal of becoming an entrepreneur someday, and you've already taken your first step while still at Harvard. Could you tell us about Laptis?
Yeah, I'd love to. So Laptis is building a digital marketplace to help streamline access to effective substance use treatment. The problem that we're trying to solve is that the substance use treatment landscape is really fragmented, it's really opaque, it's really time consuming, and it's really just frustrating to deal with. So if you're someone that needs to go to treatment, the first thing you're going to do is log on Google, search treatment centers in Boston area, and you're going to be hit with a bunch of different advertisements. And really, like, every treatment center is going to appear more or less the same. And there isn't going to be enough bespoke information that they're communicating, or enough information about your insurance or their real-time availability or other really important factors that actually determine your eligibility for treatment. So you're basically going to go down the line, you're going to call a bunch of places. The first 10 you call might not answer. They might be the wrong stage, which you didn't know. They might not accept your insurance. They probably won't have availability. And then you're going to have to fill out, the same intake form for every single center, which is a pretty deep and arduous process. And so in all, this is really confusing to people that have never done it before, and it's really time consuming. And so what we found, and I really stumbled into this problem by working with a lot of public defenders. And I noticed that these public defenders were spending half their days just looking for treatment for their clients. And a lot of times the landscape was so difficult to manage that they didn't even end up finding anything, because it just simply wasn't clear what treatment their client was eligible for. And none of these treatment centers have availability online. And so this problem is faced by much more than just public defenders. There's loads of clinicians and social workers and recovery coaches and care managers. I was like, well, if I can plug into my phone that I'm traveling to a random city in 5 weeks and spit out like 10 different options of places to stay via Airbnb. I was like, well, why can't we do that for treatment, which is a much more urgent and life-saving intervention. And so I also think the treatment centers, especially the ones that I've spoken with throughout the Laptis journey, stand to benefit from this a lot, right? Like I've talked about, this will save a lot of time for the care navigators. It'll allow clients to make a much more informed choice, which we fundamentally believe impacts in a positive way their treatment outcomes. So those benefits, I think, are clear. And then the third stakeholder being treatment centers. Treatment centers also, struggle to find their, I guess, best fit clientele for their programs. And this results in really, really high customer acquisition costs. It results in massive operations just to intake patients involving big call centers that aren't really cost efficient. And it makes it really difficult for a lot of treatment centers to take a bird's eye view on their inbound clients and actually figure out, are we admitting the right person? Are we optimizing, data indicators? And are we reducing our acquisition costs? And so we really believe that if we can solve, in a compelling way, this problem for the care navigators and the clients, we'll attract them onto our platform, which in turn will provide a very efficient acquisition method for a lot of these treatment centers. And we really do believe, if we can get there, everybody wins. And so, yeah, so how it works is obviously really important to discuss as well. And I think it's important to kind of frame this in the present and then in the future. And so what we are building is a very nonlinear process, meaning the version that we see today, that we're building today, is not, the version of the future when we have full network effects and are up and running. And the same was true of any of these networks: Airbnb, Uber, OpenTable. Version one of those platforms was, much different than the final version, because we're basically figuring out different ways to kind of get early entrants, early partners into our platform, eventually reach network effects, and then you're at that flywheel where everything's pretty automated. And so right now, if someone were to say, hey, I need treatment for myself, or I need treatment for a client or a friend or a loved one, all you have to do is go onto our website, www.laptis.io, and click the Find Treatment button. There's a big neon green button, impossible to miss. You click that Find Treatment button, and we have our intake form right there. It takes under 2 minutes, and you just fill out that form, and then our team handles the rest. And we have a treatment center database that has over 300 different treatment centers in the Boston area. And we have a process where we basically take the inputs from the intake form and we cross-reference it to the database, find what's available very quickly through some of our own, kind of creative and proprietary techniques to get that availability really quick. And then we'll let you know, like, hey, here are your options A, B, C, D, E that are in your geographical area, that accept your insurance, are demographically feasible, and, are available right now. And we just want you to make the informed choice. You tell us which one you want, and then we can facilitate the enrollment entirely. And so really it's a 2-minute process plus a decision on the back end, as opposed to, a multi-hour, multi-day, multi-week process where you're usually going into the first available bed. And so that's what we're doing now. And of course, as we continue to build the product, we're going to bring more treatment centers into our fold, and we will have kind of end-to-end technological integrations that almost entirely remove the human from the loop. But we're proceeding in a responsible manner. We don't want to automate everything away right away, because these are real humans that have real needs that we're talking about. And so we are, iterating slowly and carefully. I really do fundamentally believe that Laptis solves a compelling problem for all three stakeholders, those on kind of the sending side, those the treatment centers, and the clients. And so I think there's a really viable business here. And of course, it's a massive coordination problem. It's a huge effort to undertake, but I'm fully committed to it. I'm all in. And I really do believe that there's that there's a profound social benefit to this type of platform. And we can really limit the own goals, so to speak. Yeah, we're chugging along. And if anyone who's listening to this has any interest or any questions or any thoughts or wants to tell me that this idea sucks and I need to do a million things to make it better, I would love all of that feedback. And so hopefully my contact information will be put in the sharing of this podcast. And I'm totally open to any thoughts or any feedback or any requests for partnership.
Andrew, everything you've just said is truly resonant with me. Andrew, when many years pass, what would you say would define success?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny, if you asked me this like 5 years ago, would I say the same thing? I don't know. I think it would be like, I would definitely bifurcate this into two categories. The first being like personal, right? Which is totally decoupled from professional or academic stuff. And I think like in years down the road, I would love to have, a family and be happy and content with a strong, loving family. I think that is how I would define that level of success. And to me, that is something that it probably does impact the rest of your life, you like professionally and academically. And so, yeah, so I think that's like the first thing I'd say. I would then say, okay, with like this business, like how do I define success? We have goals to, I think like within the next 365 days, what I would love to do is help refer 365 clients to treatment and then having that number grow exponentially year after year. And so I think in a few years down the line, I mean, I would be looking at, numbers in the five figures, depending on what we're talking about in like a 5-year time horizon, 10-year time horizon. Maybe you're saying like 5 or 10 figures of people referred to treatment. And then I would which is something we can directly measure. And then I would also say societally, I would love to see rates of addiction and rates of relapse decreasing and other comorbidities associated with that decreasing as a result, at least in part of this information landscape around treatment centers being patched up by Laptis. And so those are kind of the impact goals. And there's many, many more impact goals we'd like to have. Those are kind of the big ones. And then I think if that's because of Laptis, like that would be preferred for me, but even if not, then that's okay. I think like all I can really ask for is that I'm kind of in the game, so to speak. Like I'm in the arena, rolling up my sleeves and taking a pretty big risk for something that I believe is going to help a lot of people. And if it doesn't end up working out, then that's okay, right? Like that is something that I've accepted on the outset as table stakes. And so in a way, I think success for our society is just having people that are willing to take risks on behalf of others. I think that's like so much of our progress and so many of the things we enjoy in life exist because people have taken big risks themselves for the greater good of others. And I really do think people at Harvard are in a position to have a big impact that way. And I don't think anyone, I wouldn't use the word you owe it to anybody, but I do think like people should think extra hard about sacrificing their own comforts and their own, safety nets for something that could really help others. And just think about, had people not done that over generations and generations and generations, we wouldn't be here today. And so I think that's a big point of pride I had in the military. I think in the military, you kind of give up your own personal comforts so that the rest of the nation can be more comfortable. And there's a pride to take in that. And I would say for entrepreneurs, there should be a pride as well that entrepreneurs are taking this big risk that is really stressful and a lot of times uncomfortable. And especially those with a social impact in mind can take solace in the fact that, like, even if it doesn't work out, they had the guts to try, and they are part of a class of people that do advance society, whether it's them personally in their endeavors or not. And so, yeah, so I don't know that, I guess that the last piece wasn't like a success or not thing, but I do kind of want to reframe success in the entrepreneurial context. Like I said, with family, it's much more direct. But with an entrepreneur, when you know the odds of your company not working out are very high, I do think just trying is great for everybody.
That is absolutely wonderful. To our audience, we have been speaking with Andrew Steen, and to hearing his magnificent and fascinating story about his journey from military to Harvard to entrepreneurship. Andrew, we at the Ivy Dream are so grateful that you took the time to explain your journey to us, and we assure you we will do what we can to help publicize the work you're doing now and going forward with Laptis.
Michael, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your great questions, and this was an awesome conversation. And thanks for everything that you're doing. Would love to stay in touch. And yeah, this was awesome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andrew.